process. In today's episode, I have a guest that's very close to me, and I've been wanting to invite him for a long time. We know each other since now, how long, Cengehan? 5 years? 4 years?
5 years probably.
Probably. Yeah, we met at a very interesting time during the pandemic when my family and I decided to go on a long extended holiday to Turkey to a small Aegean town called Ayvalık, and Cengihan and his sister were actually living there and were helping us with getting around the town and finding accommodation and everything else. But yeah, why am I excited today? I mean, this podcast is all about leadership, and I know Cengihan for 5 years. I've watched him grow and do great things with his life,
Yeah.
career, and I think there's a powerful story behind that that I truly believe a lot of people should listen to. And so, welcome, Cengihan. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for being here.
It's really nice to be a part of this and to be the one of the first people to be doing this. So yeah, I'm excited.
Actually, that's a valid point. You're my first guest, and that's exactly why I want to invite a guest that, from a leadership perspective, has a role that is different than what we typically think of when we say leadership. And we typically
Yeah,
think of the business world or politics. And so that's why, Cengihan, I'm very excited to have you here today and go through your story.
thank you.
Let's start, Cengihan. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? And I know right
Yeah.
now you work for Turkish Airlines as a pilot. What's your story? How did you get there?
So I had so if you look at it from a normal outsider perspective, everyone thinks that your direction is just up, but it was the exact opposite. Mine was, like an ECG machine, constantly going up, down, up, down, up, down. I had moments where I thought I was getting there. I had moments where I thought I was all over. And it took me, honestly, from 2017, yeah, 8 years to get from, beginning of training to where I want to be. Throughout that journey, there's been a lot of points where I've said, I'm not gonna do this, it's not gonna happen, and I thought of giving up. But then I think I had the opportunity from these certain I think life pointed out some things. It said, do this, you might get there, do that, you might get there. So I had some sort of direction, but I also had this internal feeling where if I give up now, I'll regret it forever. And it was, do you want to regret it forever, or do you want to just keep trying and regret maybe these next couple of years of pain and suffering, I guess. So in 2017, actually in 2016, I started my flight training. I finished it in 2017 in the United States. It was a cadet program. So the cadet programs were, the small airlines would hire you, they would train you, and then in the States, you would have to fly as a teacher, as an instructor for 1,500 hours, and then you'd be eligible to fly in the companies. But as I was finishing up my training, that company closed down. I went bankrupt, and I couldn't pay for the rest of my flight training. So I had to do other jobs. I went back to live with my friends. I was working as a waiter. I was working as an assistant. I did all sorts of I was doing Uber and like DoorDash. So I had a diverse career
And then
beginning
I
instead
know
of
it's well.
flying. Yeah, it really it showed that it wasn't a bad thing. Like when you think about it, oh, you were working as a waiter, you were cleaning up, bathrooms and all that stuff. It sounds bad, but it was actually a really, really good experience. Not because like it teaches you something. Obviously, waiting teaches you small things like about food, but it teaches you more than that. It teaches you how to be more human and how to interact with people when you're above them in a position wise. You're never above someone else as a human, but you're above them because of labels that life gives, society gives. So now when I see a waiter, I've been there, so I know how they feel in that position. Sometimes they're there because they don't want to be there. Sometimes it might be their career, but regardless, you want to reach out and help them in any way possible. So seeing those different positions in life, it helped me a lot. And then I had the opportunity to finish up my training, and I had two routes that I could choose. One, I could use the money to finish up my training to continue living in the United States, to get my licenses for the United States, or two, finish up the training and come to Turkey and get the training according to, Europe and how Turkey was. So I took the second route because I missed Turkey. I wanted to live here again, and I was just unhappy with what I had gone through back then. So in 2019, I started my conversion. I finished it, but obviously, you know what happens in 2020. I don't have to really say much.
Yeah, we all know.
Um, I was looking forward to getting hired from one of the leisure airlines here, not the majors. But obviously the pandemic happened, everyone closed everything, all the hirings were gone, people were losing jobs left and right. So I said, okay, this is the once in a lifetime matter. The pandemic doesn't happen every few years. It happens every 100 years. So we'll probably never see that again, though who knows what'll happen.
Yeah.
Um, and so what I saw from that period was I got to spend time with my family, and I think spending a lot of my time away from my family was a good opportunity to make up for that time.
Hmm.
But other than that, I tried different things. Now I was doing English teaching. I mean, I was teaching kids, 5-year-old, 6-year old kids, English and Turkish. Some that didn't know Turkish because their families were foreigners. I was teaching them Turkish as well. So I was trying to make a living off of my skills that I already had. Um, which it wasn't because I was skilled at anything specifically. It was just my people skills. I wasn't doing anything, where it required a degree. I was doing everything which required soft skills.
Hmm.
Which is why this brings it all back to leadership and how it's affecting piloting right now, actually. So I did teaching, and then I was like, okay, that's enough teaching. Let me try the States again because jobs aren't opening up here, but jobs are opening up a lot in the States. So I was like, okay, let me go back and let me do non-aviation things. I started selling cars. I started selling cars at CarMax. I did it for like 3 months, and then I did it actually really well. I was getting gifts on my first month from people that I would sell cars to, which people would say, I've been working here for 9 years, and the first gift I got was 4 years after starting, and you got yours in your first month. And I think that just showed the cultural difference, the background difference of being Turkish and the hospitality skills that we get from being raised here. But it was really nice seeing getting that feedback. But obviously, when Turkey opened up, job opportunities, I came back and I did a bit of online work while I was waiting for my Turkish Airlines opportunities. And I was working on like a marketing agency, helping them out with like performance marketing and crypto stuff because I was very interested back then, which I still am. I just don't work on it. But then I had my first round of interviews with Turkish Airlines, and the day of my final interview, uh, it happened to be my birthday, February 6th, 2023. It also happened to be when we had the earthquake in southern Turkey. And because of the damage being so extensive, Turkish Airlines was putting a lot of resources there, and they kind of, I guess, canceled their hirings or whatever. And so that from what I know, the next month or two's hirings were all, canceled. So I was one of them, unfortunately. And so when you face, the company goes bankrupt at first, and then the pandemic happens, and then this the third, an earthquake. I mean, yeah, these are not under my control. But luckily, I had this last opportunity this past October where I got hired. And yeah, since October, it's been training and training and training left and right, which basically I live off of. I had this tablet with me that the company gave me. I live with that. I eat with that. That's literally what
Yeah.
the life has become. But yeah, that's how 2016 started, and that's how 2025 is going.
Amazing. I mean, wow, what a story. I mean, first of all, one thing that is already, I think, very powerful in your background is your international personality, having lived in
Yeah, that
places.
helps.
I mean, you have a very well-rounded global kind of personality. But as I listen to your story, I mean, I hear so many amazing things in there. Just the example you gave about the waiter, you know, that level of
Yeah.
empathy and compassion is beautiful. It really, like, as I listened to your story, it impacted me quite a lot. I thought about that. You've been in their shoes, and the next time you actually engage with a waiter, or a waitress, you know exactly
Yeah.
how they feel, what they're going through, and that is beautiful. But what I really want to kind of dig a bit more deeper in your story, there's a lot to dig into, but one of them is your kind of grit the grit, the resilience, like the adaptation that you kind of showed through this whole story. You faced so many hurdles in your dream to become a pilot, yet you didn't give up. You know, you kind of, like you said, life
Yeah.
is a straight line. It's full of bumps. My question to you is, what was driving that? What was giving you the energy to keep going? Because a lot of people, if they would have faced these hurdles that you faced, they would have said, you know what, maybe it's not meant to be, and would have given up. What was driving you?
I think I was fortunate to have um, a very good amount of a good set of people around me
Okay.
that would support my goals as if it was just theirs. Number one being my sister, which you've met, which she's actually the reason why I even had the courage to attempt to become a pilot. And she's the reason how I found the cadet program and how I found that flight school. So number one was the motivation I got from her and from obviously my parents being very supportive and always having my back. So really having a structure of people around you can improve that resilience and help you, you know, and you're not gonna have motivation all the time, but they can at least point out the discipline required in order to get those tasks done.
Yeah.
And so they were always the ones doing that. And obviously inside me, I think it was this little kid that was like, you always grew up watching these, looking at these, wanting to be a part of this, you know, there's no point in stopping now. That was the little kid was very responsible as well. Which my mother has the funny story about, you know, why I wanted to become a pilot so much. So I was born and raised in Texas, but 3 months after my mom giving birth to me, she said she took us to Turkey, me, my brother, and my sister. Obviously, me being on her lap as a 3-month-old baby and my brother and sister sitting in the front seats by themselves. It was a red-eye flight, so overnight it's all dark in the plane, and I needed some warm water in my bottle. And out of all the people she could have asked, she asked the captain who was walking to the back of the aircraft.
Okay.
So my mother says, you know, this captain filled your baby bottle, and this is why, you know, there's gold, this he planted the seed basically. And I like thinking of it and using that story throughout my life because I think, I mean, not by filling up someone's bottle, but by guiding people around me in the future, I could probably help them become what they want. Doesn't have to be, they don't have to become pilots, but they can become better people. And I think the world really needs that right now.
Wow. Yeah. And it's funny, right? How sometimes certain people cross our lives and, you know, just that small filling up of a bottle of a captain on a red eye flight
Yeah,
sparked a powerful story. And that, I think that's beautiful because it again reminds me of how important, number one, stories are in our lives and the things we kind of, the
yeah,
visions we believe in and the signs in our lives that we believe in. And what you just described around like having a powerful network around you. Again, the role of the family is beautiful the way you
yeah,
describe it. You know,
yeah.
I think it's a privilege to have a family that backs your dreams, that believes in
It
your
is.
dreams as much as you do. And when you're down, you know, they lift you up. And again, it's the power of the network. Yeah, I have to say, impressive story. So, what is it like right now? Can we move into a little bit like your life right now as a pilot? Now that you have kind of accomplished that dream of flying with Turkish Airlines, which is obviously one of the
Yeah.
world's top airlines. What's it like to be a pilot? Can you talk a little bit about like your role also as a leader in the cockpit? Curious to hear.
Well, right now I'm still in training. I have about a month left of simulator training, which is kind of preparing us. It's not just so when you think of, you know, flight training, you think of how to fly the airplane. Okay, yeah, that is very important, obviously. You have to know how to fly. But there's a lot of human aspects that we need to learn, which is how to run the operation, how to coordinate with our team, because it's not just you and the captain in the cockpit. It's the purser, it's the chief, it's the stewardess in the back, and then it's also the ground crew. You have people who are working to get your aircraft prepared from the outside. You have people in the tower and you have people in the terminals. So everyone is in coordination working together. And you learn how to integrate yourself into the system where okay, like what's my role and how do I accomplish my role? It's not just, okay, let's, fly the airplane, which flying the airplane by itself is a task that we've been tackling for quite a while. But the operation is also it's actually more important than flying the airplane at certain points. So we're just trying to get a hang of how to do both. And yeah, it looks like another month or two of training for us. And then after that, we'll be hopefully in the skies with everyone else.
And you're flying Boeing, as far as I know.
Yeah, I am flying, I'm getting trained on the Boeing 737.
737 family. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And what? Just curious, because my cousin is a 747 pilot at Lufthansa, and I always, for me, I've always been the person I get onto the plane, sit in the back, and then you kind of don't even think about what's going on in the front, the back, and the outside of the airplane. You just sit there. Um,
Yeah.
and I was always curious, like, flying is quite a tiring job, the way I saw it. You're constantly on the road, you're in this tiny aircraft, there's a lot of stuff going on. And when I asked my cousin, like, what's driving the passion behind flying? He, for example, answered in a very, very, like, interesting way. He said, look, Amit, once I'm above the clouds, I feel alive. The silence, clear blue sky, just away from all the noise and everything. He just described it that way. I found that quite inspiring.
Yeah.
What is it for you? How is flying and being a pilot, how is that kind of serving you or feeding your soul?
The first time I lifted off a plane in my control as a student pilot, it was like a drug. You get hooked on it. I'm in the sky and I'm moving around in the way that I'm controlling it. That was my number one. And then I was fortunate enough to have a very intelligent instructor who was creative in teaching me things. And he said, stick your hand out. In Cessnas, you can open the window and stick your hand out and it's fine. I got to do that in a cloud. And when you think about a cloud, what do you think about? How do you think it would feel?
Kind of
Okay, yeah.
moist, I guess, and yeah, just kind of soft. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
what I
I've
thought
heard
too.
that.
But yeah, exactly. That was why it was a creative way to teach me something, and it was something that got me even more hooked on the science behind aviation. It was little stings on my arm, and it hurt. Now, it was little ice crystals hitting my arm. So when I thought of, when you think of clouds, you think of, oh, nice puffy things, and then you stick your arm out, it hurts. So it was an interesting experience. But then, as a passenger and myself, when I was flying in my student pilot career, like as soon as we'd reached the top of the clouds, like your cousin said, it was just a really different thing. It's like every time you reach that point, you're accomplishing something. You're up there, and even though there's, your headphones are on, towers talking, everyone's talking on it, you inside feel this weird silence. And I guess that's what fuels the aviation career for most of us, because we're normally probably a lot louder inside, and when we get up there and it's all silent, it feels like home. Now, it's very tiring. I haven't really experienced that traveling part much, or the pressure or the cabin issues that much, but it went to show how you're okay with living with those physiological things
Hmm.
as long as you get that psychological reward. You're kind of paying for the reward, the psychological reward, with your physiological hardships, and you get really used to it. I think you'll get really used to it. So that's kind of where it comes for me as well. So I agree with your cousin, and I think 90% of us will probably agree with your cousin.
It's fascinating what you just said. It feels like home, and when you use the word home, to me, home is
Yeah,
where you feel safe, around
yeah,
abundance and kind of everything that serves you and does you well. And it's funny. I have a friend, and I'm hoping to invite him as well, like you, someone I really, really, really look up to. He's a professional scuba diver. He's one of the best scuba divers in the world. I want to invite him
yeah.
because he dives all the way down to 200 plus meters. And he explained to me, and that's a separate topic.
Wow.
I don't want to divert this podcast right now, but it's very similar to what you described. I said, how can you go down to 200 meters? What is it? What is it that
Yeah.
you're looking for? And he just said, look, when I go down there, it's absolute darkness, absolute silence. I am with myself. It is the moment when I feel fully alive, fully alive. And he tells me it takes him sometimes 5, 6 hours to come back up, because if you go too quickly up, your brain will explode and your lungs will flood with water.
Yeah.
So sometimes at certain levels, when he goes up, he needs to sit there for maybe an hour just to pressure and balance. Anyhow, so
Yeah.
very, very relevant. And I think I want to pick on one point and continue from there, what you just said, which is the physiological, kind of the way you described some of that hardship of doing that is more, in
Yeah.
my words now, rephrasing you, more bearable when you get that emotional satisfaction,
Yeah.
psychological satisfaction from it. And I found that beautiful. I think if we look at today's world, one of the biggest challenges we have is resilience. The way you describe kind of working through that hardship with having that clear purpose and psychological fulfillment is, I just found beautiful. So I just want to rephrase that one more
Yeah.
time. So I want to move kind of to the next question, if that's okay for you. I think you know by now,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
I'm a big believer in leadership, and I see leadership, for me, I always use this quote, leadership is everywhere. Everyone is a leader. There's the moment we are able to think,
Yeah.
act, make decisions, doesn't matter how old we are, we're leaders. We're leaders of our own lives, and we're leaders of, of others that we have influence on too. So why am I saying all this? Because I want to understand a little bit, like, what is it, for example, being a pilot is a leadership role. Clearly, you're in charge of a large operation. You have responsibility for hundreds of people that are sitting on the airplane to get them safely from A to B. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what makes a good leader in aviation as a pilot? What could other leaders from other industries learn from pilots? Can you give me a little bit of perspective on
The ones that I'll go off of an example of how my training has been throughout my life, and the ones where the instructors that have impacted on me most and the ones that haven't. The one key aspect that I saw from them was empathy. They would remember their days as a student, and they would approach me as the way they would have wanted to be approached when they were students. So when they have that empathy and they see that perspective, and they remind themselves, like, hey, I was once in their shoes, then they teach and they lead accordingly to that. But when there's no empathy and they have, maybe built up anger or resentment from whatever they have from the back in the day, they don't care, they don't put the same effort in, and they just go off of what needs to be done and they're done. That's it. So it was empathy points itself out. It shows how it should be done. That's why that's the one key, personality or the key feature that a leader must have is really empathy. Because without understanding what they're in, what they're doing, why they're doing it, you can't really point them in any direction. You'll point them, sure, but they won't go there.
that's
So
powerful. And I
yeah.
think that it seems to be a little bit of also, maybe I'm overstating this now, a bit of a theme in your life as well. The example you gave with the
Yeah.
radio.
Is that's because I've been a ground crew where I was working on private jets and we were filling up planes with fuel, and we were also dumping their I don't know, what do you want to call it, their stool and their waste, all the waste of the aircraft. So you were on both ends, and now when I see ground crew, that's where the empathy comes in. It's like I know this guy is dealing with my aircraft's fuel, is dealing with my aircraft's, tires and what they're not. So there's empathy involved in even that. And it doesn't have to be in aviation. It could be in anything. It could even be in our relationships with people around us, like as in friends, as in dating, or with our parents. I think we also are very hard on our parents as well, especially these recent generations. And it's because there's lack of empathy. And we think that they've lived this life a couple times over
Yeah,
and they've mastered everything. But
yeah.
we forget to remember that this is their first time in this rodeo too. Even them, we need to show them a little bit of empathy. It's a late realization for some, but as long as you realize that you can revert it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you know what? The way I felt when you described this now is like, huge weight lifting off my shoulders. The moment you bring that empathy in and you lead with empathy,
Yeah.
everything changes. It becomes so much lighter, you know, like the cloud, right? So very light and floating in the air.
Yeah.
But it also
Yeah.
reminds me, I think, what's beautiful about your background, because you keep giving examples of I've been a waiter, or you know, and now when I look at waiters, I look at it completely differently, or I've been in the ground crew fueling an airplane as a pilot now. When I look at
Yeah.
it, I know the challenges they're going through, which is, I think, an important element of leadership. I think as well is a lot of times we find people, you know, propelled into positions where they sometimes forget what it was like, you know. And
Yeah.
parenting is a beautiful example we just give. We were all once children, and you know, some of us
Yeah.
make a decision to be parents or get the privilege. And just keeping that in mind, what was it like when I was a child? What kind of parent was I actually longing for, or a leader, is a beautiful way of
Yeah.
looking at it. Thank you for sharing that. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to add? Kind of any empathy is one, but is there any other key leadership trait you would say is transferable from to other industries?
Obviously, soft skills. I mean, leadership is all soft skills, which require, I believe, practice. You know, empathy is also something you have to practice, but also, um, how would you describe it? Speaking, like talking to someone in a manner that they can understand instead of just talking to get your message out there. You know, you can say words, but if the other side doesn't understand what you're saying, then there's no point of using those words in a sentence. So you have to have, I guess, really good, not language skills, but just yeah, I get public speaking maybe if it's called that. I don't know the exact term for it, but just getting across your message with the right words is an important leadership trait that you should probably have because you can talk and not get anything across there, and it'll be just a waste of time.
Communication, absolutely. And the words we choose. I
Yeah,
mean, words.
communication. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, words are energy, right? So it's with what intention do we
Yeah,
communicate? That's I think that's always a powerful skill as well, like you say. I want to
yeah,
dig one more level deeper on this empathy bit, if that's okay. What I
yeah,
find quite often, you know, obviously I've been spending a lot of time in the area of leadership in my life, and I kind of look at it as like people trying to balance two things. One is you got to do some stuff, right? So if you're a leader, let's say you're a pilot, okay, or you're a business leader. There's processes to follow, things to do. You got to be quite rigid, disciplined, no flexibility there because it's about, say, safety of people, right? You got to check the
yeah,
instruments, equipment, got to make sure everything works. There's an element of just mechanically doing stuff and making sure stuff gets done.
yeah,
And then the other opposite spectrum, or polar opposite, is the kind of the human element of all of this. What you describe kind of listening, communicating, being empathetic. My question to you is, how do you balance that as a leader? Because what I see a lot in the world of leadership is that we tend to over-rotate or one or the other, you know? We either
yeah.
get too mechanic in getting stuff done, especially in the corporate world, and then we forget the human bit. How do you balance that?
No, it's the same. It's the same with us too. I mean, everyone's very stuck on the mechanics of the flight.
Yeah.
But like I said, the operation and the human aspect is just as important. Honestly, I wouldn't really be able to give an example off of, what I'm doing right now because I'm still in training. But from what I expect from some of the instructors that I see is the ones willing to do the human aspect well, their flights, their operations, their feedback is probably much better than the ones that are closed and just making sure about getting the flight done. So I've heard stories, I've heard people of people who are like, this captain's great, we had a fantastic flight. Now, when someone says that, you're like, why? And because he was understanding, he was chatting with me, he was explaining things to me, he was teaching me, and we were just, we were having a good time. So our flight went great. And then I've heard stories where man, this guy just really killed my week, not even my day. Like, I don't want to fly again. What could have happened? He didn't talk. He was always angry. He would just want to get the job done and leave and all like. So it just shows how a person's attitude can change your entire perspective on a whole career even.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, how
So
many?
yeah,
I mean, It just reminds me of that pilot that you described when your mom was taking a red eye. You know, the fact that he took the
Yeah,
time to walk the corridors of the airplane gave him the chance to
yeah,
engage with a passenger on the airplane, which then inspired you to be now becoming a pilot.
yeah,
But the opposite can happen as well, right? You could also have leaders with their attitude
yeah.
destroying lives and dreams. So that's no, thank you for describing that. And I know there's one thing you wanted to specifically talk about. So let's get into that. What could be done better in training pilots based on your experience? Is there anything you want to share?
Yeah. Some of my instructors were very creative in teaching me things. And the reason behind that was they were putting themselves in my shoes and seeing how they'd want to learn it. That is the major thing. Everything about the technicals have been laid out perfectly, in my opinion. And any issues that you see aviation related are generally human errors. So we're always trying to minimize human errors because technically there's nothing wrong with the planes, but humans are what can always be faulty. So we're really focused on how to, better humans. And the more creative we get with these things, but the more we take care of the other person's emotional situation. In flight instructing, there's an important, I guess it would be like a tree or a triangle showing levels of hierarchy, Maslow's seven levels of hierarchy, where basic needs, and then you have, the food and hunger, and then all the way at the top, it's self-actualization. We don't allow people to get to that top when we're training them. We're usually at the bottom too, where it's just they have their basic needs and that's it. And then maybe understanding. But if in training we can somehow guide them to get to their point where they have their self-actualization, if they can put themselves mentally in that role and have them fully accept that role, then every task they do will have a much deeper meaning. I'll give a simple example. When we do emergency checklists, there's two perspectives on this. One, you do it so that you can pass a test or pass an exam, pass a check ride is what we call it. Or two, if you self-actualize it, I'm doing this because tomorrow this might happen in a flight and I might need to save lives, or I might need to save myself. So if you look at it in example one, I need to pass this check ride. You'll only learn it for a good 30 minutes when you have the exam, and then you'll forget it. But if you look at it for, learning it for a lifetime, you're putting it in your long-term memory, you'll carry that forever. And that comes down to how you see your role in this position. And if someone cannot come to you and explain it to you, you might not have that inspiration on your own. I was lucky enough to get that inspiration on my own because of, what I experienced and all this sorts of ups and downs. But there are a lot of people that do this job just for money, for status, for whatever, because it is a rewarding job, but they might not see everything the way that it should be seen. They might not see, you know, losing an engine might just be, I need to do this on my check ride, I'll memorize the items. No, it's if you lose an engine, you have to make sure to get back on the ground without anyone having a nosebleed. So that's self-actualization that is not really reached with every pilot that we see. So I think that's the one thing that we need to really
Yeah.
embed in training, and we need to make sure that before anyone starts it, they should, really consider why they're doing this, the why behind it.
I can completely resonate with that because I see in the business world as well, a lot of people, going through the motions and doing jobs every day, where they weren't given kind of guidance from leaders around how they work, how the work they do every day connects to the bigger purpose. I mean,
Yeah.
if you just think of, an accounting professional in a company or a teacher in a school or I don't know what it is in a sports team, a supporting staff. I mean, you can always see your role as something that is in that self-actualization top of the pyramid, right? Where what you do contributes to
Yeah.
something much greater, and that it's not just going through the motions, but actually feeling that kind of purpose with it. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad to hear that there's pilots out there that have that passion.
There's a lot. It has changed. I think with tools, with tools and with people changing their perspective. We've really changed. I was very lucky to meet Andy O'Shea, if he ever does come across this. He was the person who kind of founded this thing called MCC, which is multi-crew cooperation,
Yeah.
which he took out the technical stuff and he brought in the human aspect, which wasn't there until I think like the 1980s. So everyone was just doing their own thing. But then after, MCC came in, it was okay, this is your task, this is my task. So I was very lucky enough to meet him and have a chat with him. We're kind of lucky to have those kind of people which have changed the way aviation has gone. And I'm pretty sure that's like this in every aspect. And like you said, in business, everyone has the role in the entire community of, this earth. So I hope everyone can see their role. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And as long as you can realize your role, you'll be fine.
Yeah. And no one's going to spoon feed that to us, right? I mean, you can get some guidance from finding your purpose and why you care. There's lots of tools out there, and thankfully, there's leaders out there that guide others in that direction because they want to develop new leaders. But it
Yeah.
starts with us. At the end of the day, longing for a purpose and asking ourselves the right questions around why do I care? Why do I show up to this job every day? What impact do I want to have on the
Yeah.
world? How do I want to feel? Again, if I were to stop right now and think about what was the one red thread that connected this entire conversation, and I heard from you a lot the words human empathy. That's the thing that connects it all. And your story of hardship and getting to where you are, to what was your dream, which started when you were 3 months old. You weren't even aware, probably at that.
Yeah, it did. It did start when I was 3 months old. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate your openness. I appreciate your vulnerability. Back to communication, I appreciate you communicating in a way that anyone can relate to.
I hope so.
Very human, very direct
Yeah.
and relatable. Can I ask you to close this episode? If there was one message you wanted to leave with anyone listening, what would that message be?
Oh, wow, I never thought about this ever in my life to have a message like that. But I guess talking on these subjects is to remember that every one of us has a child in us, and we should really look out to not just take care of our own, but to realize that everyone else has it, and just to be aware of the people around us, and they're all going through something, and so are you. So it would be nice to have that empathy for everyone.
It's a powerful message. Thank you so much. Very much. Greatly
Thank
sums
you.
up our entire conversation right now.
Yeah, that's why I picked it.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, Cengehan. Thanks for everyone, whoever is listening to this. I hope this was useful in your own process of developing your life as a leader. Look forward to seeing you in future episodes. Take care.